In this video, I'm going to go over everything you need to know about sensitivity for all of PC FPS gaming. This guide will go over things that I don't think are currently on YouTube, topics I've gone over in the past but more in depth, and topics I've never talked about, as well as the bare-bone basics of sensitivity. Feel free to use the timestamps to skip past the parts you know and go straight to what you don't know. I start out with what I think is the most simple, and then just get more complex as the video goes on. Sensitivity is typically measured in units of centimeters per 360. It's basically just the number of centimeters you can move your mouse to do one full 360. It's the same as centimeters per revolution. This can get confusing for newer players, but the lower the sens value is, the larger the cm per 360 number is, and a higher sens value is a lower centimeters per 360 number. Low sens refers to when it takes a lot of centimeters to do a 360. High sens is when it takes a small number of centimeters to do a 360. A really high sens would be like 15 centimeters. A low sens would be like 60 centimeters. Most people play between this range in almost all games, though there's obviously some exceptions. There's also people who talk in terms of EDPI, which is just your DPI times your in-game sens, but since I'm going over really how to aim in all games in this guide, it makes no sense for me to use EDPI since it'll change from game to game. Picking a sens is a very important skill to have. When you're deciding what sens to use, there's a variety of factors to look into. The most obvious is the actual range of motion you need for what you're doing with that sens. If you're in a game where you make a lot of 360s because people could come from any angle, then you'll usually want a higher sens to make these turns easier. Even if your game just has a lot of really wide-angle motions or bigger enemies, a higher sens tends to be an easier choice. If a game has a lot of really precise motions, then you'll want a lower sens. A lot of games require both of these things, so you kind of just have to find a balance. Where exactly you want to be in this range depends on how much arm, wrist, and fingers you use in your motions. Your wrist and fingers have much more potential for precision than your arm, but they also have much smaller ranges of motion. These small ranges of motion make it so that you can only move these joints so far. If you go really high, you can get a lot out of your wrist and fingers in terms of range of motion, but you're really challenging the precision that they can make. If you lower your sens a bit, you can get a lot of the precision back in your wrist and fingers while taking away some of their range of motion, and then you can just let your arm take over for wider angle flicks. If you go a lot lower, then the range of motion of your wrist and fingers becomes so insignificant that they do nothing. Because these joints can make such precise movements just because of how humans evolved, cutting them out from your aim would be literally insane. For that reason, I'd recommend running a sens that gives you a balance of arm and wrist and finger motion. What that balance is really personal for you. It depends on how comfortable you are on your wrist and fingers and how comfortable you are with arm movements. So when you're looking for a sens, it's really important to keep these things in mind, but there isn't really one definitive answer. Also, keep in mind that a sens that makes your wrist and fingers feel useless in some games and scenarios won't in others. Playing a sens like 60 centimeters in a game where the enemies are really big would make it so that almost only your arm is used to move your mouse. In a game like Valorant, where there's a lot of precise motions you have to make, you can still tap into your fingers and wrist motion at like 60 centimeters just to adjust to people's head, which is really important. If you're not really sure even where to start with sensitivity, a good way to go about it is just to look at what a lot of the pros in the game you're trying to play are playing on, and then just play on a sensitivity similar to theirs. Also keep in mind that aim's a skill you have to acquire. A good sens won't make you instantly good, so don't feel bad if you can't find a sensitivity, and don't blame your sensitivity if you can't aim well. Now, these are important things to keep in mind when picking a sens, but most of them can just be summed up with play what feels right, and that's probably a good sens. The next part of this video is a lot more useful, but before I can get into it, I gotta ask you to subscribe. I really appreciate it, and it helps me keep making videos like this for you guys. There's this idea called muscle memory, referring to motor memory, that when your brain repeats an action over and over again, that action will become like instinctual. You'll be able to repeat it without much conscious thought. You'll notice that when you're aiming in PC FPS games, you're not actually repeating one general motion. You're doing a bunch of small things like adjusting your arm, wrist, and moving at a different angle every time. But motor memory really applies when you don't have to think about consciously moving each muscle in your fingers to move your mouse up after you've played PC games for a couple days or so. Back 10 or 15 years ago, people started trying to apply motor memory to other things in gaming that just didn't make sense. Basically, what these people said is that you can somehow memorize a sensitivity so that when someone peeks you, you can flick to them very easily without conscious thought, but if you change your sense, you'll lose this ability. Your brain is supposed to be memorizing the distance from point A on your monitor to point B, and then you're supposed to be able to flick between these 2 points without conscious thought. To a certain extent, this is actually true. When your brain is forming a plan of how it's going to respond to the fact that you just got peeked, it does need to know how far your mouse needs to move to get to a target. However, this isn't as set in stone and as hard to develop as a lot of people seem to think. Scientifically speaking, your brain is capable of reconsolidating and adapting to a change, like a change sense, and use the aim you practiced before on a different sense to help you aim with this new sense. If you rarely change your sense, it might take you a few hours of playing to be back to your usual level, and this isn't casually passively holding angles without moving your mouse, it's actually practicing and focusing on learning the new sense for a few hours. If you do that, then you'll be able to aim fine on the new sense within the next day, assuming the new sense is a viable sense and not like 2 centimeters per 360. And that's only if you're new to sense changes. If you're really used to changing sensitivity, you can hit your top skill level on a new sense within a few minutes. But sense changing isn't something that comes with no benefits. There's scientific evidence that the action of going through reconsolidation while practicing a motor skill will make you improve faster than if you just held one sensitivity. Study link in the description. And also, just by practicing on different sensitivities, you'll be able to get the benefits you hadn't before. Everyone's done some kind of workout where you'll do something that's harder than what you're training to compete for. You push yourself in a certain aspect of what you're training for past the point you would during a competition to improve faster and be more ready for the competition. For example, as a distance runner, I'll often run 2 or 3 times as many miles as what I'll race, just because I can, and if your race is the longest distance you run, it'll feel harder. Remember back when I said a high sense makes it really hard to be precise with your wrist and fingers? Well, if you use a high sense while you're practicing, then all of a sudden you're forcing yourself to be really precise with your wrist and fingers and struggling with it. Go back to a sense where it's more viable for the game you play, and all of a sudden you'll have a much easier time aiming precisely with your wrist and fingers. You can use a really low sense on an easy scenario with big targets to force yourself to aim really fast and get better at aiming faster and controlling your mouse at really high speeds. Playing on a higher sense but forcing yourself to only use your arm, and you'll get better at precise movements with your arm. So overall, there's a variety of sense changes you can make to help you improve your aim. Another thing to keep in mind is that you can use different senses to help you play multiple games. It can be pretty hard to use the same sense in every game, so you don't want to use that one sense exclusively in all games. Instead, find a sense that seems to work well in a specific game, and if you're feeling off one day, then just change that sense. Nowadays, there's still a decent bit of people that are very caught on the old idea of never changing your sense, because they've done it for decades, and it's a practice they've used to get Radiant, Predator, Champion, Global, etc. If the logic above doesn't convince you, we know plenty of people who've tested sense changes. Pengu, who's arguably the best R6 player of all time, never went more than a week on one sense, and he's very well aware that this is a good practice and helpful for your aim. Tens, one of the mechanically best Valorant players, also frequently changes his sense, though I believe he still thinks it's a bad practice even though he's had so much success with it. Then there's the records in just about every aim trainer scenario, which were almost all set by people who frequently changed their sense. The best aimers in the world are almost all frequently practicing and competing on different sensitivities. I've found that this misinterpretation of motor memory is really ingrained in a lot of people, and that if all this isn't enough to convince someone, then that person won't be convinced. If you're one of these people, try to have an open mind and test out something new, but if you really don't want to, you can still be pretty successful. Now, the last topic I want to go over in this video is probably the only one I wouldn't consider common knowledge at this point, and something I genuinely believe hasn't been covered much, if at all, on YouTube. It's the idea of what your sensitivity sensitivity and mouse movements actually do to your crosshair. Having a good understanding of this is really important for improving vertical aim. When you look at what you have in front of you, you have a flat plane mousepad and a flat plane monitor. It makes perfect sense to think that if you move your mouse a certain way, then the crosshair will be moved that way on your monitor. But if we look at how the mouse actually influences the first-person camera in game development, it's not at all like this. Basically, what your mouse is actually doing is giving X and Y input values to contribute to the rotation of the camera. So when you give 60 dots of horizontal input, you are rotating the camera a fixed amount of degrees. The camera's rotation is all centered around a point, but your crosshair moves almost like a sphere with an infinitely small radius that is then translated by the camera onto a 2D plane. That means if you move your mouse really high, any horizontal rotation is now centered around a much smaller radius than before. That means that moving your mouse the same horizontal distance while looking slightly up will cause a smaller motion than if you were looking straight forward, and it will also, when you get really high up, make the motion seem really distorted, and horizontal movements will make no sense as they no longer even seem horizontal. That means that you have to really practice high and low vertical aiming just to become comfortable with understanding aim in these situations. To clarify, you'll still rotate the same number of degrees, it's just that it will look different on the monitor. So if flicks that are the same distance on your monitor but start at different vertical angles are actually different rotations and therefore require you to move your mouse a different distance, then muscle memory, as in the idea that you can memorize the pixel distance between your two targets relative to your monitor and then move your mouse somehow, is just not at all making sense, because that pixel distance to how far you have to move your mouse changes. And we know this isn't a problem because people are able to aim when they're looking down and up. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more aim related content.